Now call this meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. I want to welcome all those that are in the audience tonight, and the few that are in the audience tonight, and also those who may be watching us on G10. To begin with this evening, I want to ask Councilmember Brian Jackson to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by our City Attorney, John Carter. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for gifting each one of us with another day where we can be of service to you, to our city, to our fellow citizens. We continue to pray for all those who are so adversely affected by the pandemic. We pray that there is light at the end of this dark tunnel, and that each of us would acknowledge that all of our gifts and blessings, including our health, is a gift from you, and that we would use our lives in service to you and to others. We pray for our military members serving us around the world and for their anxious families. And as always, we ask your guidance and your direction to be with our mayor and with our council. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen. Amen.
All right, Council, you've been provided a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There is none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Brings us to our first section of public comment for the evening. As of now, I have no one that signed up for the public comment. Dr. Wood?
I know there was one gentleman who wanted to come. Let me see if he's
All right.
out there. I'll make a
All right.
public comment.
Anyone here for public comment?
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the adoption of the minutes from the March 2nd, 2021 regular workshop. And there's 8 consent items on the agenda tonight.
Move for the adoption of the minutes and the consent items.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. That brings us to agenda item number 9. Just a minute here. Let me catch up, Ryan. Okay. This is a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment to Article 4, Use Standards, Section 4.3, Accessory Use Standards, dealing with backyard chickens, and City Code Amendment, Chapter 4 and Article 5. And Ryan is going to present this for us. Ryan.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Nice to see everyone this evening. Myself and Jason Larson, we worked on this agenda item together because it does impact both the Unified Development Ordinance and the City Code. The next slide, basically, as we discussed with City Council back in November, we mentioned that the City Code and the Unified Development Ordinance conflicted with one another, so we wanted to basically correct those conflicts. We want to make sure that our citizens find the information in one document and that it doesn't create a situation where they purchase something only to find out that another code doesn't allow it and the stricter rule applies. So this is before you tonight for both the City Code and the Unified Development Ordinance Amendment. Next slide, please. So with the Unified Development Ordinance portion, we're going to amend Article 4.3.1, Table of Permitted Accessory Uses. This will allow backyard chickens in the RSF 7, 10, 20, and 40 zones. This will allow no more than 5 chickens, hens. It will prohibit roosters and other fowls, so ducks, geese, Other types of fowl will be prohibited. And basically make sure that the enclosures are in the rear yards, not in the front or side yards. Some additional standards would be that we want to make sure that the pens and enclosures are set back at least 15 feet from your side and rear property lines, that the enclosures are kept clean, sanitary, and free from accumulation of excrement and objectionable odor. Commercial activities would be prohibited. And as always, this will be able to be maintained provided the chickens do not become a nuisance. And along with that, we're going to amend the Chapter 4, Animals and Fowl of the City Code. And this is going to be specifically in Section 4-85. We're going to remove the definitions and standards. However, we're going to add some verbiage there that points our citizens back to the Unified Development Ordinance. So if they open the city code, oh, I need to go find the Unified Development Ordinance, and here's the standards. So those were the two amendments to both codes. Myself and Jason will be happy to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have. We believe this will be a benefit to our citizens to eliminate that confusion and also allow small flock of chickens in the backyard. As we previously discussed with City Council, we did look at some information provided by NC State as it relates to keeping of chickens in backyards in urban settings. Be happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have.
Is that typically within most cities, the limitation on hens?
It varies, but even per that NC State guidelines, they said that no more than 5, you can have eggs every day, fresh eggs, and also the enjoyment of having chickens. However, it also talks about it's a full-time job, and what I mean by that is they need to be attended to daily. It's not one of those things where you throw them in the backyard and you come back 3 or 4 days later. It does take effort in keeping a small flock of chickens. So it's not for everybody, but we want to make sure that those conflicts are eliminated and provide the ability to do this.
How are you going to determine when chickens become a nuisance?
Well, there's several things that can come up. If just like what we have right now with barking dogs or high grass and weeds, junk vehicles, there's some subjectivity there, but if we go there and we can smell odor, noise, if the chickens' wings aren't clipped and they're in the neighbor's yard because they've basically gotten out of the backyard, they're on vehicles, boats, things like that, things that would become a nuisance, that's things that we'll deal with from a code enforcement standpoint. And I don't know if Jason wants to add to that because that's kind of more in his arena, and he may have some better information than what I just gave you. But
So there is criteria.
Yes, that the Unified Development Ordinance allows for the same type of enforcement as the municipal code does when it comes to nuisance of this particular article. So if it does become a nuisance determined by our inspection, then we can move forward with enforcement. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And at the Planning Advisory Board meeting last week, the Planning Advisory Board did recommend approval of the text amendment found in Attachment A. The City Code Amendment doesn't require Planning Board consideration, so there was no recommendation for Attachment B, but we would ask that City Council adopt both ordinance amendments in Article A and B.
I have a question. Going back to the definition, with regards to commercial activities is prohibited, can you give an example? Because I have a question I would need clarification about.
If you're selling eggs or chickens from your home, that would be a commercial type activity.
Okay, so what if, for example, if there is another distributor that's looking for hens or manures that you're selling to a bigger establishment, could you not do that? Or you're just talking about commercial is prohibited between private citizens? Like if you cannot sell to me, but if there is a bigger company that is in the distribution with chickens, manures, things, so all of that is prohibited, correct?
It would be, if it's commercial endeavors, it would be prohibited.
Thank you.
So no home-based business involving chicken. And what if the odor becomes a nuisance?
That's part of the nuisance definition, sir. That would be enforceable.
I was wondering how you rate that.
Well, I know how we detect it.
That's for sure.
So if we had a complaint, or if we noted an observation and the nuisance was observable, it would be standard procedure. We would identify the issue, we would give them a notice or a verbal warning to get it abated, and if they didn't, they would have to have the chickens removed. Yes, sir.
Have you had many or some complaints over your tenure here?
We have, yes. Most of them have been roosters, and we've always been able to address that, so this wouldn't change. We have had some chicken complaints, but not very many. But no, in general, most of the complaints have been roosters.
In my office, the reason we get complaints on chickens, primarily because they're allowed to roam a neighborhood and they go on other people's property and proceed to do inappropriate things on walkways and porches.
That's all these Canada geese around here.
Well, I really do wish that we could have an ordinance about controlling Canada geese too, but,
Any other questions? Thank you, Ryan. This time, we're going to have a required public hearing on this matter since it's a legislative item, and we'll recess the regular council meeting and open the public hearing. Anyone present wishes to speak to this matter, please indicate by raising your hand. We have no takers, so we'll close the public hearing, reconvene the regular meeting. And council, you've been asked to consider the Unified Development Ordinance text amendment and consider the City Code of Ordinance amendment.
Do you have to take 2 votes or 1?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the UDO text amendment found in Attachment A. This amendment is consistent with Policy 5.6 of the Campbell Land Use Plan. It's also consistent with and reasonable with for the public interest. And I also would recommend that we approve the City Code of Ordinance amendment found in Attachment B.
second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this matter? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Brings us to item number 10. And this is a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment. It's an amendment to Article 4, Use Standards, Use Table. And this is on public convenience transfer stations, and Ryan's going to present this. Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. Recently, we've had some discussions with consultants representing Onslow County about updating one of their convenience center sites. We used to have 2 located in the city. With the ETJ reduction, the one on Ramsey Road across from Carolina Forest was actually pulled out of the ETJ, so we have 1 left, which is down on Carver Drive. And the Unified Development Ordinance has it has provisions for unlisted uses. And basically what it says is if you have a use that's not going to happen that often, we can basically, staff can put it in to what category it needs to be in, and then really not do anything. My preference is to put it in the code so that it is clear that this use is allowed, eliminates questions that may come up, and that's why we bring these before City Council versus plugging in something that we'll probably see once every 10 or 15 years. I want to go ahead and put it in the code, that way it's clear. So public convenience and transfer stations is not listed in our waste industry type classification, and we want to put it there. When we draft Unified Development Ordinance, one of the first things that we do is we look at Currituck County, which is in the northeast part of the state, Fayetteville, because the ordinance is just like Jacksonville's. It was prepared by Clare and Associates, so the format's the same. Fayetteville didn't have anything as it relates to this, but Currituck County did. So we borrowed a lot of the information from Currituck County's Unified Development Ordinance. We also pulled some of the standards from other waste-related industries in the Jacksonville Unified Development Ordinance. We shared this with representatives from Onslow County. They had no objections to what we were proposing. But basically, we want to add public convenience transfer stations within the waste-related services category in the use table of Article 4.1. It would be a permitted use in the RSF 20 and 40 zoning district, so the larger lots, typically ETJ, outskirts of town, because that's where we've seen most of these transfer stations exist. And we wanted to create use-specific standards. That way we make sure that there is some buffering in place and some standards. So this would be above and beyond our normal zoning standards. And basically it would be owned and operated by Onslow County, because that's who we would expect to see run a facility such as this. We want to make sure that we control the access to prevent unregulated dumping. So we would expect to see a fence put up, which is typical what you have at their transfer stations already. They don't want the public going in there and dumping the wrong materials in the wrong containers, because that just creates a problem for the county later on. We want to see a setback of 50 feet, and within that 50 feet, there would be a type A buffer within that area. And we want to make sure that there are hours of operation, because you could have residential properties nearby, limit those hours from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and ensure that proper movements and stacking occurs, because you do have some larger trucks that may go in here, trucks and trailers, to make sure that there's not stopping on a public way, creating a safety concern. As stated, these standards were shared with the consulting firm that's working with Onslow County. They discussed it with Onslow County planning staff. There was no objections there, and staff is recommending that we incorporate this into the Unified Development Ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time.
Council, any questions of Mr. King? Thank you, Brian. We have a required public hearing on this matter, and at this time I'll recess the regular council meeting and open up the public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing no one, close the public hearing and reconvene the council meeting. Council, you're being asked to consider the Unified Development Ordinance text amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion. I recommend that council approve the UDO text amendment found in attachment A. It's consistent with policy 5.6 of the Campbell Land Use Plan, and additionally, it's in the public interest and is reasonable.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, we have some discussion topics on 11 through 13 here. We're going to start with number 11, the master plans for city parks, part 2.
Council, thank you so much for giving Susan and I the opportunity to come talk with you again tonight about our master plan. As you are aware, we were here 2 weeks ago and talked to you about the parks listed: Jack Amyette, Kerr Street, Riverwalk, Wilson Bay, and the Marina area. And tonight we're going to talk to you about Georgetown, Phillips, Wooten Country Club, and the Commons Recreation Complex. Before we get into those, we wanted to give you the opportunity from 2 weeks ago to make any comments potentially that you have on the parks that we did 2 weeks ago. And I'll bring the maps up in just a moment to refresh your memory. Be reminded, our intentions are to come back in April on the 6th to maybe give you another presentation of hopefully the remainder of the parks. And then hopefully we'll be able to bring this in front of you and with a package of our master plan for your potential adoption of our master plan as we can move forward for the next 10 years on where we're going. Any questions before I start? So this right here is Jack Amyette, and you're familiar with this. As you know, we're getting ready to build our recreation facility over there, and you can see on the middle top left of it the storage building. You can see the Mickey Mouse ears, splash pads, and potentially a shelter over there. So these are things that you should be familiar with. And again, we just wanted to bring it up to remind you if you had any comments about it. If not, we can move along. Next up, we have Wilson Bay Park. Again, one of our hidden gem parks. One of the things to remind you that we need to do over here in the future is maybe update our existing restrooms as well as bring our existing playground up to an inclusive playground with a soft surface, and just again, reminding you of those things moving forward. Right here, we have Kerr Street Park, and this was a plan that we had some comments on last time. You can see on this particular map, we have the basketball courts outside of the fence in center field, and the amenities closer to the recreation facility. The next map, you'll see we had moved the basketball courts. We do feel like that this is our best option moving forward. Putting the courts closer to the putting the basketball courts, closer to the tennis courts. Sometimes there's foul language. We should probably stay away from that. I understand that they do have a little bit of a walk, but we think this is our best map moving forward. And if you have any comments about that, we're obviously, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, we want to make sure you understand, we're not suggesting that the foul language comes from basketball or tennis. It may come from the playground from time to time, but potential conflict of use.
Right.
But this is one that we do need to have some direction either tonight or at the time that you adopt the plan. I know several of you had the opportunity to go visit the site. Certainly there is a walk from from this plan where the basketball court is out in center field. That court will be lit. I can certainly see that from time to time, if you're batting at home plate and playing softball or baseball, those lights out there could be a problem. It's really, the issue on this park is we're trying to get 6 pounds in a 5-pound bag. So it's what's the best way. The most important aspect of this park, though, is the expansion of the center itself and additional restrooms. As Susan has addressed to you at the last meeting, the restrooms currently are shared by people using, especially children, using the indoor facility as well as external uses. So this is a very high priority for us to consider expanding that. And part of that solution may be building new restrooms exterior. Part of it may be building the restrooms, which you will see, I don't believe tonight. Will we show the marina tonight?
I believe we have
It's right here.
review right there.
We talked about these last week or last 2 weeks ago.
And there are going to be some restrooms there. But at some point, we do need your direction on where do we put the basketball court.
Question, aside from the problem of walking across the street, why not the restrooms in the area of that pavilion?
Primarily, we were concerned about the children and traffic. One of our early plans called for this road to be closed. And after further discussion with a number of people, especially several in the neighborhood, we decided we would stay away from that controversial item for the moment. But our concern there would be children crossing the road. I think when we put the restrooms in at the marina, you will see children crossing the road. We just have to try to regulate it with speed bumps or better crosswalks.
How many parking places do you have down there for an event?
Existing at Kerr Street, there's probably close to 40 total if you count the ones behind the building, the ones adjacent to the ball field on the left field line and tennis court, and then in the outfield
And
area.
then the outfield area, yeah, at least.
But as you can see, it's a very spread out parking area, which,
Restrooms in the pavilion, you say?
yes,
Will
sir.
be? All the time as well?
Oh, there will be?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Show me the full map again with the basketball court out that way.
This one?
Yeah, I'm trying to see. In relationship to, I know you said that you don't want folks crossing the street. How far is that bathroom? Do you have a map with the bathroom?
The bathrooms would be relatively about 200 feet,
Okay.
looking at the ball field,
Now Can you go back and put the basketball court back near the community center?
Let me ask you a question. Is there a room, physically room to come around if we have the basketball court in the far right-hand corner? Physically room to come around the left field side to that restroom if it's there?
Yes, sir. If you hug the outfield fence, and let's just say walk close to it instead of hugging the fence. If you walk close to the fence, there is room. Many of the trees that you see in this particular graphic are no longer there because of Hurricane Florence. But you could certainly put a sidewalk. We would not want anyone using the street itself, although that street, which is Spargo, is very low volume. We would want people walking on a path. So if you put the basketball court out there in the center field, we would certainly put a sidewalk in to connect it.
So what did all the decisions used to decide to put that basketball court over there?
I'm sorry, sir, say again?
I said, because I heard language before.
It's a combination of, and let's remove the word language. Basketball is a very physical activity. There is a lot of, I'm clear, you throw it to me, what a dunk, great shot, all those type things. It's a very energetic game. Tennis, on the other hand, is energetic, but occasionally we have pickleball, which we know Mr. Bittner and the pickleballers, they're not energetic at all. They just enjoy a nice, calm game. Question really is, do you want to have your expanded recreation center in that location, your basketball court in that location, and your tennis court in that location? And remember, at the same time, you're going to have a softball activity or little league activity going on. We really felt that just spreading it out. But at the end of the day, it's your master plan, so you tell us what you're comfortable with.
And if I could add, we did compare this location to where the basketball courts are at the Commons. So the Commons are out by the parking lot. Their distance to the restrooms are about comparable to this distance to the current building, to the current restrooms. We did look at other basketball courts in relation to what we have right now. So we like the location of the courts at the Commons for the same variety of distance on all the activities that we have. So we kind of use that as a model looking at all of our parks.
What I would suggest you do is visit the sites. We don't have to make a final decision tonight, but if you would visit and then give us some direction at some point, because remember, once we adopt these are your master plans and we will use them for grant purposes. Now, obviously, you can amend the master plan at any time.
I had a question, Mr. LaCory and Ms. Baptist. With the design for the new bathrooms, are there going to be more than 2 stalls, or separated for men and women, or is there going to be something for babies, families, for those particular restrooms, including the ones at the pavilion?
Well, I'm not going to speak about the pavilion bathrooms so much as I am the ones at the site. We have the potential with the type of restrooms that we're building, that you've seen at the Landing, that you've seen at Jack Amyette and Wooten Park and Northeast Creek, to create a core bathroom and then build off of that. If we were going to put restrooms in a community or in an area where we felt like the traffic was a little more and we wanted to add commodes or toilets or urinals to those restrooms, that building footprint allows us to do that. So we have the ability to do that with the model that we've put up in the parks that I listed earlier.
What's the scale on this?
The scale?
Well, what's the difference in footage from the rear of the community center expansion to the basketball court?
I think we did about 150 feet is what we talked about.
I'm sorry, say that again.
She thinks 150 feet from the back of the extension on the building to the beginning of the basketball courts.
No, there's no way that could.
I don't think it's that much
In this graphic, Mr. Bittner, I would guess that it's probably 30 feet max.
Not enough to put restrooms on the rear end of the expansion.
Oh, I guess I was thinking of the.
I mean, that's the nice thing about making Jell-O, as we call it in City Hall, is you can make it anything you want. And you certainly, when we get to the point of expanding the Kerr Street Center, you could actually put bathrooms on the back of it. It's just we want to make sure that the bathrooms that the outside users use are not accessible from the inside, because the current problem with that building is we have adults from the outside world entering the bathrooms from the outside at the same time children who are inside the building are using it. So we could certainly design that building to have restrooms on the back of it.
Which is what Jack Amyette Recreation Center right now has. It has a wall and a door, and then, you can access
Right.
two sets. So that model definitely works from a security standpoint. Kerr Street Rec Center does not currently have that right now. So it would be certainly a solution we could look into.
If you reoriented the basketball court to more vertical, wouldn't that give you more room off the back of that
It certainly could,
community center?
yeah. We'll continue to study this one if that's acceptable.
Okay, moving forward, the marina, was there any comments about the marina? Obviously, we kind of covered that, about the pavilion that we're looking to put up in the next couple of months.
Let's talk about that for just a minute. The parking, at the present time, you will notice the only thing shown for this master plan is the boardwalk out front at the water, the boat slips themselves, and then you can see the pavilion. The pavilion will be a combination of independent restrooms for men and independent restrooms for women. It will have a design that is very much nautical. It will mirror the center portion, the same as we have on this building with the bell towers, but it will look more like a lighthouse at the end. We hope that within the next month, we will have the preliminary conceptual plans for you to look at. I would remind you that with the roughly $70,000 grant we received from FEMA, we have to have that facility completed by September of '22. Yes, roughly 18 months away. So we'll be bringing you some concept plans there. Until we really get that building finished, we have not come up with how we're going to use the rest of the open space. What we don't want to do is use the very large open space between the left-hand bottom of the picture and the pavilion to park cars. I remember a county commissioner once saying, cars don't mind if they don't have waterfront views. So for the moment, we're looking at that large area as being open space, green space, picnic shelters, that type thing. But this particular one, we're still working on it. There will be angle parking on the street, but there will not be a parking lot in that large open area unless y'all direct otherwise. So.
Moving forward, yeah, as you can see here, Riverwalk Park and Riverwalk Crossing in LP Willingham, we had talked about the potential for turning the old water plant into a museum, obviously creating a shelter down at the end of the park in front of the maintenance facility. And, we do know that this is a very high-profile park. A lot of events take place there, and, we think it's a good park, and obviously we want to move forward and make the appropriate improvements to it as we continue to grow. Any questions on it? Any comments? So moving forward, bringing us to Georgetown Park. Georgetown Park has seen a facelift in the last couple of years. And some of the parks we'll talk about tonight have seen a lot of facelifts, just like Jack Amyette has. And we've had a great partner in community development helping us create facelifts for these parks. We have a new playground. We have a trail over there. We have a exercise equipment. These are amenities in this park that are valuable and nice, and we're proud of them. Some of the things, the components in this park are playgrounds with soft surface, and if you've been by there recently, and I do mean recently, we're in the process of adding another small piece over there, and hopefully in the next week or two, that'll be finished with a soft surface. And you can see on this picture some restroom facilities that have recently been built. Also, the walking path, the shelters, like I mentioned, are the shelter, and then the exercise units and the open space. So what does that take us to? These are the components, and I just listed those out for you. They're important moving forward, and how do we get to where we're going in the future? For our CIP and for our master plan, we need to replace and/or update the existing picnic shelter. We need to potentially add an additional shelter over there. We talked about the soft surface at the playground. We need to continue those steps as a park system. And the basketball court over there, currently there are 2 outdoor basketball courts that are next to each other. We would like to see those changed from asphalt, which they're currently asphalt, to concrete, and then potentially add lights there, as well as adding lights along the walking path, and hopefully one day add lights to the multi-purpose field. And again, I want to take you back, to the map to give you a sense of what I just talked about. Lighting those pathways, creating lights on that multi-purpose field, adding that shelter to the other side of where the existing basketball courts are. And then you see on the top right is the existing shelter of either putting a new shelter in or retrofitting that shelter to bring it back to life, and which we think are very important things for us moving forward. So what do we need to do in the next 5 years? Some of the things we're in the process of doing, some of the things we've already done, and some of the things we'll need to continue to work on, and they're landscaping, replacing our benches, replace the wooden fence next to the road, which is almost completed, and like we said, light the walking trail. Any questions about Georgetown?
Do I recall that this land is under lease from the county?
That's correct, sir.
How long is the lease?
To be quite frank with you, I don't know, but we will find out. I believe it was a 100-year lease.
Okay.
Mr. LaCroix, can you
Yes, ma'am.
please clarify the word benches? I know what I think.
Park benches.
Okay, so with that particular plan, is there, for the Georgetown, is there any indication of putting bleachers around the fields or the basketball courts?
I think those are definitely steps that we would take moving forward to be included in this, that if we saw that those items were needed in those parks, definitely we would put those in those parks. My expectation is Georgetown Park is going to start to become, as time goes by, a little bit more popular park. More and more of the community is going to use it. I think that's one of the reasons Susan and I have identified getting lights on that multi-purpose field and being able to utilize it in a way. And obviously, if we're going to utilize it, we're going to have areas for people to sit and bringing bleachers in and things like that. Yes, ma'am. So any other questions or comments? Moving on to our next park, Phillips Park. A lot of us, everybody in here is familiar with Phillips Park. A lot of us have a past at Phillips Park where it was basically our balls and bats park, and it has seen some changes, and this is one of the changes we would like to see take place at Phillips Park over the next couple of years. It is our most visible park to traffic. It borders Highway 17. Currently, what you'll see out there is an open space, and you'll see that site is used by groups that rent the fields at times, or the property, and sometimes Susan has special events over there, and we obviously have the park and the playground for the shelter area for the public to use. But what we would like to put over there is a park that caters to children. And as you can see from the map, playgrounds, we have 4 playgrounds, we have a couple of shelters, open space areas, we see a kayak launch and a boardwalk. This would be a place where, going to a playground is fun, but sometimes not all playgrounds have all amenities, and this would be an opportunity for us to put multiple playgrounds out there that are inclusive, where you could literally go from one playground to the other and have a whole different experience, and it all be within a walking space, which we think is important. One of the other things that we feel is needed in this park is the circulation. If you're not aware, you can get to Phillips Park from Highway 17, but you can only get so far into Phillips Park. If not, you have to come in from the neighborhood, and there's really no connectivity there in between. This map, you can see coming off 17, you have some connectivity. It'll take you back through the neighborhood, and that's the potential that we like for the park, that it will create a circulation that will make that park, we feel like, grow and be definitely a destination for children, birthday parties, family reunions, all of those things. So, our components that we just talked about are the playgrounds, the boardwalk, kayak launch. We'll have to put something small out there from a maintenance perspective to house equipment, as that park will need to be maintained. Parking out there needs to be addressed. And these other items, one of the other needs we have out there that are great are our restroom facilities. Our restroom facilities are in dire need, and we need to upgrade those moving forward. So our CIP wishes and hopes would be new restrooms, the inclusive playgrounds with the soft surfaces, the walking path with lighting. The existing shelter out there, we think we can update that shelter to meet today's standards. The maintenance building, and then obviously the circulation would be a very important step in all of this. What are we doing there? So from our end, we're doing a lot of our general maintenance there. We do repair the existing facility if there's something wrong, but we really don't try and invest a whole lot into this park until we have a direction of where we're going, and this is why we're doing a master plan. This is one of the reasons. So we welcome any comments about Phillips Park moving forward. Reverend E.W. Wooten Park, again, another park that, again, with our friends from community development, about 8-9 years ago, we were able to make a difference in this park. Created a new playground, took out the existing asphalt basketball court, something we're talking about at Georgetown, and put concrete in. And these are things that have been upgrades to this park that have made a huge impact. We know that the trail borders this park. It's very popular for people to drive to this park, use the park, and then also use the trail. We have restroom facilities there, and these are, this is a very good standard of how a park needs to look, and that's Wooten Park. So what are some of our components? A picnic shelter. We have an existing picnic shelter over there. We do feel like it's going to need some work moving forward over the next couple of years. We need to, again, either upgrade or replace that shelter. We need to add another playground piece over there. There's a nice playground over there, but it's very single-minded to one activity. We need to add to that moving forward. Some of the parking needs over there. I know the parking lot needs to be sealed over there. We need to address that. We need to make sure that the property that we are using is being used the right way for a parking lot. Creating maintenance space. As you're aware, we do have some maintenance space behind the park. We're really not showing that on the map. The old EMS area, we share one building, and I believe fire shares another building. The restroom facilities, as you're aware of, and then the basketball courts lighted in the open space. So what do we need to do moving forward in the short term or over the next 10 years? Update the picnic shelter, the playground, the soft surfaces, and then we need to look at potentially purchasing parcels of property to help that park out. And what does that mean? That may mean off of Bell Fork Road, if opportunities become available, it would be in the city's interest maybe to look at that as far as creating an entrance into the park that is more roadside than once you get turn on to Ellis Boulevard. So just those are things, again, that we feel are important moving forward. Any questions or comments about Wooten Park?
Yes, I have one. Splash pads. I guess, are pretty popular. I mean, we've got two now, I believe. That to me would be a good location for a splash pad if we had the room.
Well, and we, as you can see, there is some open space in the park currently that we could look at that and definitely maybe look at adding that to this map moving forward. Thank you. And yes, our splash pads are extremely popular. They are. They've been a hit. Country Club Road. So if you're not aware, we have a piece of property on Country Club Road. We have struggled with this piece of property in the past on how to develop it. We've looked at doing some things there, but the land there's not a whole lot of land there. So, we had public meetings and we got input from our citizens. And one of the things that was talked about was potentially a dog park. And one of the ideas behind putting a dog park in an area like this is that's all it is a dog park. You don't have a playground near it. You don't have baseball games near it or soccer or whatever other sports it is. You have a dog park here. And we felt like this was a good use of this piece of property moving forward. If the city is going to choose to go in this direction, this is a piece of property that may meet the needs of the public if we see that as something we want to move forward with. Currently, our maintenance over there is just general. We go over there, we mow the property, we keep it upkeep, we do our upkeep, and we come back in a week. Any questions about?
Where is that actually located? I'm trying to.
Yeah, orient us.
So the best way for me to orient you is if you were to, I'm sorry, if you were to turn off of Bell Fork Road left onto Country Club Road, heading towards Western, I would say it's almost halfway down on the right-hand side when you go past the overpass. It's right there, or maybe it's right before the overpass. On the right-hand side, you'll see an open space there. There's no homes there. There is a road right before the property that I believe takes you to some apartment areas, I believe, and
There's housing, there's
housing back there. If you're looking for it and you ride by there, you will notice it. It is on the right side, as I said, if you're going towards Western Bar. It's a nice piece of property. It's just not a large piece of property. And
how long ago was there a meeting about the possibility of putting in a dog park? When did that take place?
well, it wasn't just about a dog park. We had public meetings a little over a year
Right before
ago.
March. So we had two public meetings. I want to say one in January and one in February,
Correct.
right before March of last year. And a dog park does tend to come up as far as, does the city have one? I can say that we get calls about them when people move into town and they ask and they inquire. So that's when it came up.
On this parcel, we would either recommend leaving it vacant and not developing it, or develop it as a dog park. When you look at the traffic volume and you also look at the demographics in this neighborhood, it doesn't lend itself for anything that children would be involved in. You're going to have to drive to this. So if this is a good location for a dog park, great. If it's not a good location for a dog park, then the best thing to do is just leave it vacant. Because we would not want to have something that we would encourage children in a high-traffic area like this to be on their bicycles or walking. I mean, obviously, this is your neighborhood, so you know how that volume is. So on this park, we'd either recommend one of two things. Either take it off your master planning and leave it vacant for a while, or turn it into something where people are going to be going to the dog park. The other thing that John and I have talked about a number of times is the liability of dog parks. Not every dog likes every other dog, and not every dog likes every other handler of other dogs. There is definitely a liability issue when you get into dog parks. And that's why in the past, we have, I think, I will speak for myself, the attorney can speak for himself very eloquently, that if you develop a dog park, you are moving into a liability that the city currently does not have. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have one, We just need to be aware that things happen at a dog park. Mr. Attorney, how about helping me out here?
You're doing a fine job.
Any other comments?
Dr. Washington, this is really your area. Would you prefer this to be?
I was just thinking that the dog park just doesn't seem like that would be the appropriate place. I was thinking that more because there's more older citizens that live up on this particular neighborhood where their street is located, that you're right, there isn't much that you can do with that parcel of land. But if anything, I could actually see something whereby there was like a shelter or something that families could have a cookout, because parking, of course, would be an issue because it's on a major state road, but because so many people know one another that live on that road, you can easily park at your friend's house, then go over to the shelter, have a community gathering. I could see that being more so utilized. Not to say I don't have, I'm a dog lover, Belgian Malinois, that's me. But I'm just saying for the neighborhood, something of that type, because the closest park there is to Country Club is that either we would have to go to Jack and Miette or go to the Northeast Creek. So, yeah.
How about if we do this? We'll bring you other options for you to look at to see other than a dog park. Is that acceptable?
Or even putting something like a walking track so people could get out of their house and get some extra. I mean, I don't think that a dog
We'll come up
park
with
is
some other ideas.
compatible. Yes, sir.
Okay, moving forward, the Jacksonville Commons Recreation Complex. One of the things I've got to say about the Commons is it's a wonderful facility, but we all need to bear in mind it's 25 years old. It's not the facility it was the day we built it, and just bear that in mind. As you can see, we have beautiful ball fields out there, some that cater to our youth leagues and our youth population, and others that cater to our adult population. You can see the existing parking that we have and the additional parking that we receive from transportation and the park and ride. Some of the things on the map that you'll hear us talk about is the potential for in the purple on the lower right-hand side, that is where our old skateboard park used to be. What we would like to do is, moving forward, plan for a miracle field to be put in that area. As you can see, we have sat down with the engineers and measured this out. It actually is a space that will fit. We think this is a great opportunity with the parking that's already there, with athletics that's already there. And if we're going to reach this population and reach it where all of our other athletics are taking place, this is a good opportunity for us.
Define what a miracle field is, please.
Miracle Field is geared towards special needs. It's a soft surface, a much smaller field, and it is specifically for folks that, or just any of our special needs youth population. So it might have some audible cues. It'll have a soft surface for any ambulatory folks. It'll have things that will help with any type of disability. We currently have a special needs baseball program, and it would be pretty much similar to that, but a much easier surface, much smaller field, and it will cater towards a population that does not have anything going in that line of inclusivity at a ball field with other ball fields.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what are some of the components of our park? The playground, we'd like to bring it up to scale with an inclusive playground, are obviously our facilities itself, the outdoor basketball court, large picnic shelters, the woods, the bike and running trail, the walking paths, the lighted ball fields and tennis courts, restroom facilities, splash pad, challenge courts, and parking. And where would we, open space and Lake Bidner, and then our maintenance facility, and then multiple gyms and community centers. So Where does that take us? Some of the things that we feel are important is to add a second gym, create an inclusive playground at this park, replace some of the existing restrooms, add a splash pad, keep working on our existing challenge course, and then keep working on a maintenance area where we're able to house what we currently have. I want to take you real quickly back to the map and show you some of these things. We talked about the Miracle Field, and then if you'll look at the two parking lots and you see the gym and the current recreation facilities, we're looking above that into what we have always termed our overflow parking area and putting a gymnasium there. And the importance of that gymnasium for us and for the citizens of Jacksonville is ultimately the Commons is a destination for balls, bats, basketball, and things like that. What this would allow us to do is to create 4 gym basketball courts at the Commons. Why is that important? It's important for Susan as her youth leagues continue to grow, potentially any adult leagues that we have. As our volleyball program continues to grow, that is something we need to take in effect over the next couple of years. These things are probably going to grow. They're trending upwards. What else? We have special events, as you're all familiar with. The East Coast Invitational utilizes us and it comes to Jacksonville every year. This would be a benefit to Mr. Gullidge and him having 4 courts right there at the Commons, that he's not sending people out. He has a great partnership today with the middle school at the Commons as well as Northside and Jacksonville High School. I'm not saying he wouldn't use those courts still, but I'm sure there would be a value to him in having these courts here. There's potentially value if we have large pickleball tournaments that we would be able to house them. And as you know, and you've heard Susan talk about, she's had pickleball tournaments with, over 100 people. There's value in these sorts of things moving forward. And we feel like there's a definite value right there for us and for the city of Jacksonville, especially as we continue to grow, You can see on the bottom of the screen, just above the Miracle Field, the splash pad, and then obviously restroom facilities, and then the playground area, this is where we think the Commons needs to go moving forward. We want to continue to make it the main destination for athletic events. That's what it is. Doesn't mean you can't go out there and go for a walk, as you're well aware. We have people every day that come out there and do those things. But if we're going to have growth in our leagues, there's definitely a value to us having 4 basketball courts and then also having access potentially to a middle school and a high school that has 2 more basketball courts right next to us, whether it's for basketball or for volleyball.
And then also, don't forget the fact that the new gym we're building at Jack Yet. So, dreaming down the road as if money is not an issue, which obviously it always is, you could wind up with a great gym at Jack Yet, the current very good gym at the Commons, and another very nice gym, almost the mirror of the Jack Yet gym built here. And like Michael said, it would give you the ability to really house some of the major tournaments. Now, these facilities are really built for your population. If on the side they can accommodate sports tourism, that's fine. But the real purpose of this is your citizenry. The other thing I want to point out, we purposely have not identified the ball fields as youth or adult. We want to have all the flexibility in the world. So as we grow, it may be that all of those fields wind up being youth fields, that adults would be relocated somewhere else. But we purposely are just calling them ball fields, not adult fields or youth fields. That gives you the maximum flexibility in the future.
Where's Richard Ray Park located in conjunction with that map?
So Richard Ray would be at the top of the screen where we see Lake Bittner. If you were to be able to keep going, you would
Okay.
see what would be Richard Ray Park.
All right.
It's its own master plan.
It is, yes,
We'll have that for you on part 3.
on the 6th. Any other questions? Any comments? Just general maintenance is what we need to do over the next couple of years. Improve our landscaping. We put our restrooms on a cycle of, we need to repaint them. I know Susan's going to need some new scoreboards for her ball fields. Yeah, obviously, we're going through some concession stand upgrades currently. Tile in some of the rec center, our seniors areas are going to be needed to be addressed, as well as, again, any restroom upgrades. So that is on our maintenance plan. As we talked about, we will come back on April 6th. We'll probably go back through what we went over tonight, give you a chance to digest what we've said, maybe make some additional comments. We'll also work on bringing some new drawings for Country Club Park and maybe giving you some different looks at the Kerr Street Park. And our goal right now is still to come back in May, hopefully, for adoption. And we really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share what Susan and mine and all of our vision is for where we think Jacksonville needs to be over the next couple of years and in the direction that it's going. And appreciate your leadership in that. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Mayor, if you don't mind, could we take a 15-minute break?
Sounds good to me. Okay, we're back in session. Dr. Woodruff.
Members of council, as we have mentioned over the last several meetings, we are in the budget process. This year, we're developing what we call major budget topics, and we're bringing those to you long before you actually see the budget book. This evening, we'd like to talk with you about two. One has to do with personnel requests for the police department. The second has to do with a budget request for the computer-aided dispatch and the records management system for police and for fire department. We're not asking y'all to take any action on these. That will occur at the point of adopting the budget. But tonight, we're very pleased to have with us Deputy Chief Ashley Weaver and, of course, the Public Safety Director and Chief of Police, Mike Unera. Please.
Council, thank you all for what you do for our citizens, and thank you for your time. I'll try to go through this. If you have questions, please ask at any time. I will certainly stop and answer the questions that I can. And if I don't have an answer, I'll find you one. So we, every year, we go through and we evaluate the agency, what our manpower looks like, what our calls for service look like, and what our needs are to be able to effectively provide services to our citizens. And those services we want to fit with our core values, and number one of which is being trust, especially this day and age in the society and national issues that are going on. Trust has to be the number one of our core values. Innovation, you see innovation in what we do all the time with the awards that we get and the programs that we put in place. The chief does a really good job at helping us down that path to be ahead of the game when it comes to a lot of the issues that are on the national stage. We were all quite proud of the fact that when the presidential mandates came out, we literally checked boxes because we were already doing and have been doing for the last 8 to 10 years, most, if not all, of what those mandates were. So our core values are our community policing. Give you an overview. This is what our budget generally looks like every year to show that, you know, most of what you spend for the police department is the personnel, because that's who does the job, and that's what people see, and those are what interact with the public every day. For those that are unaware, I wanted to kind of give you a breakdown of what the police department looks like. We have 3 main divisions. Patrol and field operations is our largest division because that is the boots on the ground. Those are the guys and girls that are out there on the street doing their jobs every day. That incorporates our patrol division, our traffic division, our DARE, grade officers, and those community officers that are out there engaging with the public all the time. And it's not just the community officers that engage with the public, it's all of our officers. We don't like cops in cars, we like cops out on foot and talking with people and engaging people that are around them. The second division we have is our administration. It's one of our smaller divisions, but this is a key part of our agency. This is our records, our communications division, the 911 center falls under administration, the hiring, training, payroll, and our professional standards. So this is the policy and procedures and ensuring that our agency is meeting those. Our last division is investigative services. This is the behind the scenes. This is the detectives that work in adult investigations. This is our special victims that cover all of our special populations. So elder abuse, missing persons, any crimes against children. It also includes our criminal intelligence, our special operations and internal affairs, and our victim services unit. To give you a kind of a breakdown of what those divisions look like, we have 126 sworn officers, and as you can see, most of where we put our personnel is on patrol, in that patrol and those field operations, those ones doing the work. We do have them in the other divisions, but we have 1 deputy chief, captain, lieutenant, and 70 full-time sworn officers. Administration. You'll see this is a lot more of our non-sworn personnel and some of our part-time positions. And then investigative services is the next probably largest area when it comes to actual sworn police officers. To give you an idea of what we've kind of done over the last couple of years with overtime, although FY20 is a little bit of a misnomer because that included COVID. So a lot of the events that we would normally have, just like National Night Out and things like that, did not happen the way that they normally do. A lot of the city-sponsored events, the big festivals, things like that, where we have officers that are out. A lot of this also, we have been able to dial this back through management of our personnel and their time. So just to give you an idea of what we've been doing. Turnover, you can see, I believe it was 2018, 2019 when we put the step plan into place, 2019. And you can see that those numbers have started to come down of being able to retain officers and not have as much of a turnover. So community policing, this is at the core of what we do. Every brand new officer that comes in, from the moment they do their first interview, they are introduced to community policing and the fact that it is at the core of what we do. No one at that agency should not have a job in community policing. Everyone needs to be making those encounters, those positive encounters, and engaging the public. And why do we do that? Because it's part of your one city. To be one city, we must be out with our community and in that. The problem, we're starting to see the difference. This is why we want officers out on the street. We want them out of their cars. If people see an officer drive by, it's just a police officer. When they get out, when they talk to people, when they're engaging with people, they see the officer. They see Ashley. They see, I have to call him Chief, so they see Chief. I did. They see the chief, but they see the person behind the badge. They put the face with it. It humanizes who is in that uniform. And of course, our goal is to be proactive. Our goal is to be out preventing crime. We don't want to have to respond to crime. We want to be out and about and engaging people and helping the citizens solve their own problems. You know, we can't be everywhere. We can't do this job without the citizens. And the police are not always the answer. So if we can give the tools, if we can give the knowledge to the people in the community, then it's a win for everyone. So this is what we've been seeing over the last several years. You can see this is back to 2012, the call volume, and this is just citizen-initiated calls. So this is not the traffic stops, this is not the administrative calls, the court, meal breaks, all of that. This is when a citizen picks up the phone and calls the police department and wants a police response, whether it's through 911 or through the administrative line. We have seen a tremendous increase, over 50,000 calls for service. There was a slight drop last year because of COVID and everything, the shutdown and stay-at-home orders. So we did actually see a little bit of a dip in last year's numbers, but we are already seeing those numbers going back up.
I think one of the important things when we talk about the reason for those calls for service are not necessarily related to crime. It's been our responsiveness to the department for a number of other things besides simply crime. Order maintenance calls where people are having issues with all kinds of things. So those calls, while they have increased, our crime rate has not increased at the same rate. Those calls for service have been because people demand more services from us. And I think, we talk a lot about the mental health issues and the mental health issues that we've been facing. We responded to about 1,000 crisis intervention calls last year. In fact, this weekend we had 6 overdoses where we responded to. And so the mental health, substance abuse piece has greatly increased those requests from services from the citizens, especially what we're dealing with the homeless and the mental health calls that we respond to. So while we look at this and think about, does this indicate an increase in crime? Really doesn't. It increases the demand for our services, the broad services that we provide. And that's just a result of the community policing process.
And it's just because the calls go up doesn't necessarily, like Chief said, it's not a negative. It means that the community trusts their police. They trust their agency to actually respond. And you end up in a bad community when they don't want to call the police. And we don't have that, which is a very wonderful thing here in Jacksonville. One of the things, though, that we are seeing is we've begun sliding towards being reactive just because of the time that it takes and the demands that are placed on, and the expectations placed on the officers with de-escalation and calming things down, the crisis intervention, and the time that it takes on those calls for service. On average, last year, we spent about 53 minutes per call, and that's a citizen-initiated call. So that's one officer spends about an hour on just one call. And that time expands when you're dealing with crisis intervention and with mental health because, again, law enforcement isn't necessarily the answer to that. The answer is getting them to the resources, which we can do, which is what we have our officers trained to do. And one of those resources is the Dix Crisis Center, some of the other grants that we've been put in place, the crisis counselor, substance abuse counseling, getting them into those resources, but you have to de-escalate them first and get them out of that crisis before you can help them get to the right resources, because our job is to turn them over to the people that need to be dealing with them. Jail is not always the answer. But we have begun seeing us trending towards spending more and more time on those calls and having less time obligated. You can see that we spend about 7% of our time on our self-initiated, so that would be the traffic stops and things like that. That available patrol time, you can see in 4 years, has dropped over 10%. We went from 34.8% back in 2016 available time. That's officers actually available to take a call or get out with a citizen and do some of those proactive policing, community engagement things, to now they only have 23%. And a lot of that also deals with court, and the time that they spend in court and in training, the training for de-escalation, the training for crisis intervention, and some of those mandates that have been put in place that we have to maintain some proficiencies in the legal updates and knowing our job. That's a huge piece of what we do.
And we're real proud of the fact that we've had a 78% drop in use of force over the last several years. And I think this slide is indicative of what it takes to do that. And that is, officers have to spend more time on calls. They have to spend more time explaining. They have to spend more time communicating with folks on calls. And we've invested a lot of money in our CIT training. We've invested money in crisis counselors. We've invested time in our officers, training them in how to look at these situations and de-escalate these situations. But that de-escalation is much longer than when I was on patrol, and there was no real de-escalation. So the idea that, when we talk about being proactive, some of the things that we've done to reduce use of force has made it more difficult for us because we are spending more time. We are taking our time with our citizens. And that has to do with use of force, but it also has to do with developing that relationship with our community. Taking time to explain our actions to, we went through the traffic stop initiative where we were telling our officers, take your time, explain why you stopped somebody, explain why you detained somebody. And a lot of times that is part of that de-escalation piece, but it starts that process so that people understand why we stopped you in the first place, why we're detaining you in the first place, and hopefully nobody wants to be stopped by the police, but at least it makes it a better experience, and that's some of the things that we have been working on over these last several years. And I think, the ICP award is part of that process, and we're proud of that, and we're proud of it because it's part of the One City campaign.
So this is just another view of how those calls for service have increased. You can see in 2016, citizen-initiated was only 35,000 calls, and we, in 2020, had 52,000 calls. So our challenge is balancing that community engagement, our training, and our ability to respond to crime. Some of the community engagement programs that we have are our Coffee with a Cop. You can see you all participate in our National Night Out and those events that we do. I regularly see you all out and engaging in the community when we are out doing these programs and these events. Citizen Academy, we're hoping to be able to do that again this year. Obviously with COVID, we've had issues with being able to bring people in and actually do programs. We're hoping to be able to get back on track on some of those programs. Some of the essential and mandatory training that we talked about that we provide or that we encourage and require our officers to be part of are the crisis intervention. Every officer that is in uniform is CIT trained and wears their CIT pen. They get that within their first year of being here. The fair and impartial policing that came about after Ferguson, we ensure that our officers go through that training. The ICAT, which is, Chief can explain that one a little bit better than I can. It has to do with the de-escalation. The leadership programs, let's see, some of our proactive policing, DDACs. DDACs is the data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. Where you have crime and traffic and overlay, you create the DDAC, you put your enforcement efforts in that area, and it helps to alleviate the issues that are going on in that area. The LEADS program is one that we are proud of, and it's the law enforcement assisted diversion. So if an officer stops someone with a user amount of a substance and they have a substance abuse issue or substance use disorder, we can actually forego charging them and if they're willing to go into a diversion program and actually seek assistance. And we have that set up through Dix, and it's part of actually the COSAP grant that we put in place. Another piece of that is that overdose fatality review that we participate in. So when we do have overdoses like we did over the weekend, like Chief said, we had 6. I read one shift summary, and one shift summary had 3 in it one night. You know, that luckily they weren't fatalities, but the part of that program is to actually review where did the system break down, or was there a place in the system that maybe some services could have or should have been put in place. So while it is dealing with a death, it's trying to prevent other deaths later on.
And I want to thank you. I mean, part of that is the investment that you made both in training and equipment. I mean, every officer carries Narcan now. Every officer's been trained in Narcan. And that does take time. It takes time away from their patrol activities. It takes time to train them and to do that. But you all made that commitment several years ago to fund that program, and it's been very successful. I can't begin to say how many deaths we would have had in our community had we not funded that program, had we not worked with the fire department to make sure that we're responding to those overdose calls as appropriately as we can.
So what do we want to take a look at when it looks at the cost of crime? This is, so the RAND Corporation put together a study for the cost of crime. They created this calculator that actually looks at what are the total costs to a community for a crime. And that is from the moment it happens, lost wages, time in court for the district attorney's office, magistrate's office, every place that a citizen has to touch because of one crime and the related costs for those. Adding the value of one officer to deal with that or to prevent those crimes is roughly $320,000 savings to the community. We are asking, so we've done this evaluation. We do it every year. I won't get into the details of the different ways to run the numbers, but you run the numbers several different ways, and when you look at either per population or crime rate of the number of officers that are needed, the low end, we're probably short 30 officers. The high end, we should be sitting at 200. We're at 126. So we put together a plan to understanding the fiscal responsibility that you have to the citizens. We are asking for 6. We have options for 2 and 3 over a couple of years, but we are asking for 6. So we wanted to include this calculator to show you what the cost savings could be for the citizens with additional of 6 officers, which is the combined value of $1,925,000 to the community.
And we do know that there's a relationship between the number of officers if they are appropriately deployed. And, we talked about the DDAX, we talked about intelligent-led policing, we talked about just a few minutes ago, but if officers are deployed in a way that they are in neighborhoods that are having challenges, they can work with those neighborhoods just like we have in a number of neighborhoods in Jacksonville, and we'll continue to do. So I think having the time to do that is the real challenge. And this kind of brings home to, the more we can address those challenges, the more benefit it is to the citizens. The more, if every crime we prevent is a crime that we don't have to pay for, that the citizen doesn't have to pay for, that the community doesn't have to pay for, that somebody doesn't have to go to jail. So our goal is to stay proactive. Our goal is to stay ahead of the game, whether it's gang activity, whether it's the opioid issues, and we've been working on the opioid issues. I know that we did several presentations talking about that, the mental health issues that we're facing, that we'll continue to face as things change in the mental health industry. We're going to continue to face those challenges. So we think it's a good investment to look at how we can be as proactive as we can. We understand the fiscal constraints, but addressing some of those things, the increased demand for service, the increased time we're spending on calls has all put a strain on that patrol division. And we're going to continue to look at ways that we can be effective, either, and that's another presentation that we're going to talk a little bit about today is transitioning to a new CAD and RMS system. But all those things are to create efficiencies. And but when it really comes down to it, the boots on the ground are the most important thing. And they're the ones that make the difference. Since I've been here, and the staff will tell you, one of the things they talk about continuously is about administrative people. And I've made a real commitment to make sure that if we add anybody, it's in an enforcement position on the street where they can do the most good. Whether it's a detective that's following up on those calls, or doing something with child abuse and child neglect and the ICAT training, which is, or it's somebody on patrol, or it's somebody in one of those enforcement positions. They're the ones that make the most sense, and they're the ones that are going to have the greatest impact on our community.
Question.
Yes.
Question for you. With the Department of Justice, have you heard any information or rumor about them starting up their community-oriented policing
We have
grants again?
We've looked on their website, obviously, but what we've heard is that right now that they're kind of holding back some of those COPS grants. You know, that's one thing about living in this community, that you know, we have such a low violent crime rate that it hurts us when we look at those federal grants. And we want to keep it that way. And you know, when the COPS grant comes out again, we're gonna be in front of you asking you to do that. I don't know what direction that is because of you know, the national politics right now. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We do know that obviously there was a bill passed last week that had some significant reforms in it. We don't know what those reforms are going to look like when they get into the Senate. But there are going to be, I think there's going to be some reforms. And to get back to your question, I think that's going to be tied to that. And that's why I don't expect that we'll see any COPS grants for the next 6 months to a year.
So we wanted to give you the three options that we've come up with. The first option being 6 officers, to give you an idea of what that would look like. The total cost is roughly $512,000. The recurring cost obviously is salary, which is the largest piece of that. Those one-time costs are actually spread, as you know, over a couple years because that's the vehicles and those are the larger items that they get financed out. So that wouldn't be as much of a, still a big cost, just not as much as the salary. Option 2 would be to fund 3 officers. Clearly the slide didn't get changed, just 3 officers. It did on the top, just not at the bottom. And then, of course, option 3 is to fund 2 officers for the next 3 years. The goal is obviously to get one for up to 6 officers over the next couple of years, whether we can do it in 1 year or we need to spread it out for fiscal responsibility over a 3-year period. That is obviously what we would leave to you all to make those decisions.
And we're committed to putting those officers on patrol.
Well, I have a question for you, if I may interject. About 5-6 years ago, when we had the diversity report that was done, one of the areas with the police department is that report highlighted women and and African Americans on the police force. Has our numbers increased since that time of women and African Americans on the police force?
With African Americans, we've stayed relatively the same, around 14%.
And actual numbers, what would that 14% be? Like
So it would
25?
be about 16, 17 officers.
Okay.
African American. Now, because of our community, I think what happens is we get military.
Sure.
They're here for a couple years and then they leave. Women were around 35%. We're actually
Our numbers, what would that be?
35 officers.
35 officers, okay.
So we have a higher percentage of women than any other metropolitan city in North Carolina. And I think some of that is because we're a military community, and some folks come here with their Marines, and then they end up working for us. And then some Marines get out, some female Marines get out, and they like that kind of work, so they join the police department. So actually, North Carolina Central reached out to us last year and asked us what our secret was, because there's a number of communities in North Carolina that are struggling with female officers.
Now,
Washington,
yes.
on Monday, I had the pleasure, Ron and I meet every city employee when they come into orientation. And on Monday, we had the opportunity to meet a young lady who's an African-American experienced police officer who's transferring to our community from another community here in North Carolina. So that was obviously a young African-American female. That adds both. But what we'll do is we'll actually get you and the council the specific numbers that show you today each of those categories.
And Chief, at this point, for our African-American police officers, currently, what is the highest rank that person holds right now in the police department?
Currently, I think it's sergeant.
Sergeant is the highest. Is that a male or female?
Male. Black
Two
male.
males, two black males.
Yes. Yes, Josh.
You still actively recruit different places like colleges and.
We recruit all the time. In fact, we had a meeting this afternoon talking about recruiting on social media. So we actively recruit all kinds, and part of the challenge that we're going to face, that our community is going to face and our nation is going to face is the fact that people are going to be reluctant to get into law enforcement because of all the issues. I mean, we've seen a drop in the number of students in our basic law enforcement training. Nationwide, we've seen a drop in applicants across the board. And I was working with a community for accreditation in Virginia, and they're having the same problem. The same problem with telecommunicators, the same problem with police officers trying to actively recruit police officers. So I think we're going to be challenged over the next 5 years because of the situations that have happened during COVID and with some of the riots and things like that, to actively recruit quality people. It's going to challenge not just us, but all law enforcement agencies.
I experience with accreditation, and you're very experienced in it also, that one of the standards talks about recruiting, making that extra effort as far as minority populations are concerned with your recruiting efforts.
And I think it's really important for us, it's important for us to try to mirror what our department looks like, what our community looks like. And diversity is important. I think it's very important to that community policing process. It's important in the community, and it's also important in how we relate to the community. People with different cultures bring a different perspective, and as those perspectives come together, we have a better understanding of what we need to do. I mean, we talk about all these different things they do with leads and QRT teams and coffee with a chief and coffee with a cop, but, you know, relating to people of different cultures is extremely important, and it will continue to be important as we try to engage the community in the best way we can to try to reduce crime, because that's really the community policing process.
Chief, have you worked with other communities that were more effective at getting more minorities?
You know, that's a struggle. That's a struggle across the country. It's a struggle. I think that we have a little bit of an advantage with the Marine Corps being here. I think that helps us because our community is so diverse. But when I do I still do on-site accreditation, and every community has the same struggles of trying to get. And some of it is that cultural thing and trying to break that cultural challenge. And, you know, to be honest with you, the events that have occurred in our country over the last year make the challenge even greater and make our job a little bit tougher trying to engage communities that need us the most.
What's the percentage that are prior military on the force?
If I was to guess, and I would say that and I usually say that it's either prior military or military related, you know, because sometimes they come with a spouse or similar to that. We're probably about 70%. We have a lot of folks that come in. We just hired a retired sergeant major that actually we sent him to BLET, and he just started with us. Said he'd been in Jacksonville for 25 years, and this was the first time last Friday night was the first time he experienced a payday Friday night in Jacksonville. So he was quite surprised by what goes on. So, but I think we're a little bit better than most because we're able to recruit from the military.
When was the last time we did add officers? Do you remember what year, or is it?
I think 2010, maybe. We can get that. I think we added one to victim witnesses because of some child abuse things in 2013 or 14.
Out as a grant.
Right.
Mayor and council, I would, just, money is the bottom line. I can tell you that the police department has good justification. When I looked at the draft budget this year, there are 17 and a half positions that I'm facing. I can tell you I'm not bringing 17 and a half positions to you. I understand the reality of budgeting and the reality of taxes. That's why I do appreciate as the manager that they've given us 3 options. I can tell you that if you want to fund option 1, you're going to have to significantly dip into your savings. Option 2 and option 3, we're certainly going to work as a management team to see. Tonight, we're not asking you for any direction, But as your manager, I'm going to tell you that it's going to be very difficult to add positions. You know, when we met with the fire department last time, they asked for 4 positions. You gave them the nod to apply for a grant. Hopefully they can get that grant. But again, when you look at the lack of growth, while COVID did have an impact on us, but we wound up in the black. We did not really lose revenue. There is not a substantial growth in revenue. And when you look at the North Carolina retirement system mandates of increasing, you look at health insurance increases, you look at the mandates that we don't have control over. You know, we're very fortunate to have a quality staff, police, fire, and other staff. As I put together the final budget, I will be making specific recommendations to you. But I can tell you that that recommendation will not include hiring 6 personnel in 1 year. And that's why I do appreciate what Ashley and Mike have presented as what I'll call the payment plan. You notice I didn't say the easy payment plan, but the payment plan on how we can begin to add personnel. I know Ashley has, I think, 1 or 2 other slides as we finish this, please.
So this was just the discussion to bring it back to the forefront that Dr. Woodruff asked us to look at and make sure that we included. Back in July of 18 for FY19 is when we put in place the step plan for our patrol officers up through the rank of corporal. At that time, when we brought it forward and council agreed, there was a recognition that there would need to be some ongoing administration for that with some occasional review in order to ensure that we can maintain competitive nature with being able to recruit and bring people into the positions, even the ones that we currently have. We raised the starting pay to $38,000, which that officer is a police officer 1, caps at $40,000. At that time, the average weighted salary for police officer 1 was actually $45,000. So we didn't take it to the average. We did bring it up to competitive in our area, to what others around us were bringing people in at. Obviously, that hasn't adjusted, but the average weighted salary has continued to rise, and salaries around us have continued to rise. So today, in just the 3 years, it's had a $3,000 increase, where those positions don't get COLA, they get their step every year. And PO1 gets a $500 step every year, and then PO2 gets a $1,000 step every year, and that's the way those positions were at. This is just to bring it back up, just so that you are aware that HR and Dr. Woodruff wanted us to make sure that we do look at this going forward, because it will impact also when you hire new officers, or if you do approve new positions, that obviously that will weigh into that.
Mayor and Council, on the next item, it is actually a combination of presentations between the police and fire department. Several of us will be stepping out. No, we're not going home. No, we're not going to Lazara's Pizza, but we will be available. But this time, I'd like to ask the fire personnel who are out in the waiting area to come in, and several of us will step out while they discuss the computer-aided dispatch and the records management system. Okay, gentlemen?
One more question. What is the cost of overtime for the police department, or can you all provide that?
I think one of those slides has that on there.
Okay, I missed it.
It's over $400,000 a year. We'll get the overtime.
This past
It was
year,
down, huh? It was down
Down.
considerably.
I don't have a pen, but.
Who goes first?
We'll let you go first.
All right. Good evening, council. I appreciate your time and consideration as we talk about the records management system for the fire department in addition to records management and computer-aided dispatch for the police department. So the overall mission, to summarize, for the fire department is to constantly strive for quality improvement in the services that we provide to our community. And we're always looking for those ways to become more effective, more efficient, and more economically responsible. In that analysis, we've identified a significant hurdle with our current records management system, and we'll talk a little bit about that through this presentation. Our records management system is something that is utilized by our newest firefighter all the way up through the fire chief. Our entire department utilizes it for the ins and outs of our day-to-day work. Everything we do is tied to that RMS system hub. It's the hub of everything that we do. In addition to the fire department, our 911 center utilizes that as an interface with CAD to pull information from to assist us when we're on emergency incidents. Our engineering department utilizes it from time to time to get available fire hydrant flows to assist developers and contractors with water supply demands for whatever project they may be taking a look at. Our GIS department utilizes that information to help us with mapping our incidents, so we know where we're responding to the most fires, so we can look at trends throughout the community to see where we're responding to particular call types.
So I think it's important to recognize that we're actually talking about three systems. Fire has one records management system that is different than the police records management system. And we'll talk about why they're not the same system in a little bit. And then CAD is our computer-aided dispatch that is used for both police and fire. The police department record management system is, again, kind of to echo Sean, it's the hub of everything we do. It is the reporting, it is the citations, the warning citations, everything goes into that records management system. That's how we track our evidence. All of the evidence is placed into the records management system. Our crime analyst uses our records management system and our CAD system for a plethora of requests that she gets. Matter of fact, we got one recently from someone who reached out. They're moving to the area and they wanted to know what the crime looked like in the neighborhood that they were looking at buying a house in. Those are some of the services that we provide. And our records management system is used to track that information and to be able to provide that to the citizens. Our training records are included in that records management system, and all of our investigative dashboard is in there. So an investigator gets assessed. So the patrol officer takes the report out on the street. It gets sent electronically to the supervisor. No more handwriting it and picking it up in the middle of a parking lot somewhere. It gets sent to the supervisor. They sign off on it. It goes in for a records review. The very next day, our investigative sergeant reviews that case, decides whether or not it needs to be assigned to an investigator, and the investigator takes over from there. It puts on their dashboard, and they track all of their activities, all of their notes, all of their supplements, all in this one records management system that we currently use. I got ahead of myself. We actually have an interface with the district attorney's office that saves an efficiency, that they can actually sign into the system, and instead of us having to print off case files and hand carry them over to the DA's office, they can actually sign into our system and review those cases for themselves and actually load that information, and they can provide discovery to the defense attorneys from the system instead of having to use paper. Did I skip CAD? I skipped CAD somewhere in there. There it was. My apologies. CAD is our 911. It's our E911 center. It is not just for 911. It is not just for the emergency calls. It's for every single thing that police officers do, firefighters do. Every time they check out on the radio, it tracks where they're at. When a citizen calls and asks for some type of enforcement or some type of response from police or fire, it is used in that. The 911 center uses the CAD most, but other places do use it. Our officers have it in their cars. Firefighters have it on the trucks. and they're able to actually get the information about what's going on at the call before they arrive on scene. You ready? Now I'll go back, sorry.
So the fire and police have actually sat down and we've spoken with a number of vendors throughout the industry, and there is no one solution for all three services. There is no one vendor that provides an adequate police records management system, a fire records management system, and a CAD system. There's some that may dip their toes in the water for each, but none that produce the product that we need for the needs of the modern fire service and the modern police departments. Our fire platforms are limited due to the needs of our accreditation standards as well as the ISO requirements that we need to maintain that ISO 2 that we have across the city. There's plenty of records that we have to maintain. A lot of those newer systems that try to do everything don't provide the modules that we need to properly track that information.
On the flip side of that, most of the systems do provide, that do provide 911 or CAD, do provide police systems that meet our accreditation needs. We just haven't been able to find one that meets all three needs.
Yes. So just a little bit of history. We are presently using Firehouse RMS. We implemented that back in 2008. When we implemented that, it was already a 10 to 12-year-old software architecture, so it already had some years on it at the time. And we all know technology changes every day, let alone every decade. So just a quick snapshot of 2009, our emergency incident volume was 1,283 calls for service a year. And our FY19 was 4,738 calls for service a year. That's a 269% increase. We chose to look at FY19 versus FY20 because our call volume is down due to COVID and our limited responses to make sure that we remain vigilant to our priorities of providing fire service and supplementing our EMS system. Our non-emergency activities have also increased exponentially, and that is our fire hydrant maintenance. As the city grows, there's more fire hydrants that are put in, so that's more information that needs to be tracked in the RMS system. As new businesses come to the city, that's more fire inspections, more pre-incident planning, more plan reviews, more consultations. That's all information that needs to be tracked as well. The training requirement for firefighters, as Chief Tallman talked to you guys about 2 weeks ago, that has grown exponentially over the years. And that every training that we do, there's an entry that has to be logged into our RMS system so we can go back and look at that historical data to understand. Say a firefighter was to get injured, we want to analyze that entire situation and go back and see where they were adequately trained and what it is that they were doing, and it allows us to do that. So some challenges with our present RMS system. Firehouse RMS is presently nearing the end of life. I got off the phone with Firehouse this morning. They are very close to Microsoft Azure, is how they pronounce it, hosts their customer service abilities. So if we have an issue with Firehouse, they can send us an update to fix that issue. A little bit later this year, they're going to announce that that's no longer going to be hosted, so that service will no longer be available. So if we have an issue, there will be no way for them to provide us an update to remedy that issue. They're also not modifying the software anymore. As I said, it's such an old software architecture, they refer to it as dead architecture. There's nothing that they can do to expand upon Firehouse's present capabilities. And as the fire service industry grows and we provide a more diverse services to the community, this records management system is not growing with us. We are very much limited by its abilities. That ties into the next point. Every day we have 36 plus employees training, fighting fires, responding to EMS calls, trying to run data analysis to look for trends within the community. With 36 employees, we only have 8 user licenses with Firehouse. That means only 8 people can be logged in at the same time. So that work gets backlogged. People are having to wait for other folks to log out of the software before they can get in and enter their work. And when we respond to emergencies, it's vital that we be able to come back and do those incident reports right away, because the longer you wait, the more information you lose in your memory, and your reports may not be as accurate. So with those 8 user licenses, it very much limits our ability to enter our work in the system. Lack of data analysis tools, that's not to say we cannot extract data from Firehouse, but it's very much labor intensive. Everything has to be custom queries written using SQL code, exported to Microsoft Excel, and custom analysis done. It takes a few days to get information that newer software packages can give to you in a matter of seconds. And in a world where decisions are driven by data, our decisions lag because of this inability to produce that data. No historical staffing records. What that means is our battalion chiefs use that every day to create the rosters for the shifts so folks know what truck to report to. As we do staffing changes, it updates the entire system. So I can't go back and look to who was assigned on engine 1 December 30th of 2010. It would show you who's assigned to it today. So there's no way to go back. If we had an issue with thinking someone had a potential exposure and I want to see the entire crew that was with them, Firehouse does not allow me to do that. So that's a concern for us as well, and I already spoke to the limited technical support that's available. This is just an example to show our increasing incident type from FY9 through FY19, and it's continuing to rise. We're responding to just under 5,000 calls now, minus FY20 due to COVID. And this is just an example of some of those non-emergency activities that we talked about. As the city grows, so does the demand for fire inspections, plan reviews, and things that our fire prevention division performs for us.
So the RMS and CAD, just give you a little bit of our background. We actually transitioned to the current system, which is Central Square, for both RMS and CAD in 2013. Prior to that, we were using the same company, but it was the green screen, AS400 HTE system. And that's when we had officers still up to 2013 doing reports by hand on paper. So 2013 is when we fully transitioned to a digital system for both CAD and RMS. The call volume in 2013 at that time was 101,000, and in 2020 we had 150,000 calls for service. So we had a 54% increase, and it manages every aspect from when that call comes into the 911 center, it's entered in, it's dispatched out, it goes through the MDT, the mobile data terminal, to the officer. It's also dispatched over the radio. They actually have the ability to, on that system, if dispatch runs a name or has the caller's information, they can actually, instead of going back and re-entering that information, pull it from that system straight into the report. So it is a time efficiency for the officers in being able to do that from the beginning all the way to the end. And that includes the arrest, that includes the property, logging evidence in, being able to track where it's at, not having to go look on the shelves and see whether or not the evidence is there, or they can look in the system and see that it's actually at the lab, or it's been released to the owner, or where it is, and there's tracking notes and audit locations and audit notes for each of those. Some of the challenges that we've been experiencing, Central Square for the system that we have has issued an end-of-life statement for our current platform. They will still support it. However, the updates and things like that will eventually start to fall off and will not be able to do any. Some of the issues we've had is when we want to change something with the system now, it takes 2 years and $20,000 to get anything done, to change anything in the current system. And that is the general party line. It'll be about 2 years to get the engineers to do that, and it's going to cost $20,000 to have it done. One of the experiences we've had is when they do push out a new update, it usually crashes about 4 other things in the system. So then we have to go back and undo the update so that we can have that fixed. So they're not able to ensure those platform updates are going to happen beyond the current, what we have. It has, over the last several years, the customer service has dwindled, to say the least. It's the service level has declined every year with acquisitions. One of the other issues is it doesn't interface, though we have CAD to CAD. It doesn't actually interface with the county. They cannot see our screen unless we give them access to a terminal. It doesn't interface with the jail, with the sheriff's office. So if we have an officer, some of the newer systems, when an officer takes the report and they do the arrest report, they can actually push it straight over to the jail so that they know what's coming, they know who's coming, and they can already be prepared, and they don't have to re-enter all of the information. So there's a lot of interoperability that we are lacking with the current system. You saw this previously, our increase in our demand. So some of the opportunities that we've identified, Onslow County is also looking to move to a new CAD and RMS system. So for cost effectiveness, we have actually reached out and worked with them on creating an RFP to take a look at and see what the cost of a system that would actually be able to interface between the two. And we would share a system, much like the 911 or the 800 megahertz radio system. So we are exploring that to be able to provide you some information. If we do, the firehouse new system that they've identified can actually interface with EMS.
That's correct. And Onslow Memorial Hospital also utilizes ESO, which is the option we're going to present to you. And what that would allow us to do is look at system-wide outcomes for patients versus just looking at agency-specific to see how the patient reacted to our treatments before we transfer care to Onslow County EMS. This would allow us to share data between Jacksonville Fire and Emergency Services, Onslow County Emergency Medical Services, and Onslow Memorial Hospitals. We would be able to measure the outcomes from the time that first responder reached the patient through their ambulance transport until they are discharged from the ER. So it would give us a better idea of how our interventions are making a difference holistically to the community.
And with the city, the police 911 center and the county 911 center going to a platform that could interface, it would actually allow some time management and some efficiencies when getting those 911 calls where, let's say it's a vehicle crash and there's an injury. Obviously, our dispatchers are getting the information and it has to be then transferred over to the county, who then has to get all of the same information over again, where one system would actually, or as long as they could interface, the moment our dispatchers actually put it in, the county would be able to see that call's coming and see where it's at and start somebody heading that way to be able to provide the more advanced care that would be needed on some of those scenes. The crime analysis function, some of the new systems actually will allow, instead of us having to use our crime analysts to actually create that information that I talked about earlier, where we had someone call and they're moving to the area, they want to know what the crime looks like in that area. There are some interfaces in some of the newer products that actually allow the citizen to do that themselves, that actually be able to go online and actually see what's happening on their street at any time. They can look at any time frame that they wanted to, so they can get real-time information about obviously only the public information that would be available, but they would actually be able to do that. It also helps us with our predictive policing and crime trends and resource allocation. Chief is huge about putting the right cops in the right places at the right time. And so some of those functionalities and that crime analysis is the newer systems actually help us to be proactive. So it fits with those efficiencies and what our goals are as well. We want a system that has multi-jurisdictional capabilities so that we can interface and work with the sheriff's office and potentially even Camp Lejeune. Being able to, they do a lot of mutual aid, and I'll let Chief Hayes talk about that.
Absolutely, we do. We have a very strong automatic aid agreement with Camp Lejeune for certain areas of the city of Jacksonville and certain areas of Camp Lejeune. When we have fire incidents or motor vehicle accidents in those locations, both jurisdictions are dispatched simultaneously to allow for the closest unit to arrive to the call to render aid the quickest. There are some lags presently with our present CAD system. We may be dispatched and be midway to the call, and then you hear Camp Lejeune's dispatch. There's just a lag in that transfer of information that we're hoping a new CAD system will help alleviate some of that lag and cut down on our call processing times to get those units to the people that need help quicker. So fire and emergency service, we have spoken with vendors across the industry. We've taken a look at their products, what they have, and done an analysis of what they offer versus what our needs are. And we've identified that ESO record management system is the best option for us. It provides the most robust software package and also will help improve our effectiveness and efficiencies, and we'll talk about that in just a few seconds.
And as I said earlier, we actually created an RFP with the city and the county to get responses based on what our needs are and the needs of the county so that we could give you an idea of what this may look like going forward.
So some of the benefits of moving to ESO, as I said, Firehouse is a dead architecture package that's 20-plus years old. The fire service is changing every day, and not to mention how it's changed over the past 20 years. ESO will offer us a package that not only meets our needs of today, but it's flexible with engineers and software developers that offer ad hoc services to us that could change as we change, as our service delivery changes, as our trends and incident types change, and our needs for records management changes. They're willing to change that software and adapt with us. Whereas we currently have 8 users logging into the system at one time, this will be cloud-based with unlimited users, meaning if all 88 of our fire department personnel want to be logged in at the same time, they could be, and the system would not operate any slower. ESO has actually purchased Firehouse. So they're looking at taking Firehouse users, offering the new package, and making an easy transition from Firehouse to ESO. With that being said, where other software developers would be charging us $125 an hour to migrate data to the new system, this would be free for ESO. They're offering that for existing customers. It's a free data migration package, as well as keeping our existing Firehouse database open for as long as we want. So if we want to hold on to that forever to have that historical database, they're willing to keep that open to us just to be able to go back and search past histories. Another key tool is it supports mobile devices, and we're going to speak about that on the next slide and how that will improve our efficiency, our effectiveness, and our economical responsibilities. If you want to go ahead and transfer that next slide. So presently, the Jacksonville Fire Emergency Services has limitless paper in a paperless world. Everything we do is paper-based. When we're on an EMS call, we're filling out a paper patient care report that we call it a rip and run. We're handing a carbon copy off to EMS. Our fire investigations, our fire inspections, our pre-incident planning is all done on paper. So our folks are having to do that paper report there, come back to the station and wait for their turn to be one of those lucky 8 users that can log into the system to get in and log in that work that they've done. What we want to do is have our folks be able to plan their days around training to provide better services to the citizens, whereas now they're having to plan their time around getting back to the station to enter all this work in the computer. Whereas ESO allows mobile capability, meaning they could enter all that information from the mobile data terminal computer in the truck, or if we added tablets to the truck, they could do all that information real time while they're doing the fire inspection, while they're doing that patient care report, while they're doing hydrant maintenance, fire inspections, pre-incident planning, so on and so forth. If we move to ESO while Onslow County is using ESO, if we get there first, do that patient care report, our tablet could sync with their tablet. So instead of them having to duplicate a report, that data just transfers to them, then transfers to the hospital, and it really creates the efficiency and effectiveness to allow us to take care of the incident at hand and quickly move on to the next task without having to worry about coming back to the station, entering that in the computer before we head out to take care of the next task of the day. So our implementation cost for this, the first year is a little bit more expensive than the rest, and that's just for that initial implementation and to bring them in on site to train our personnel to utilize that program to its utmost capabilities. That is something that we did not do in 2008 when Firehouse was brought to us. We were handed a manual. Basically, read the manual, you guys will figure it out and go with it. It took many, many years for us to utilize that program to its utmost capabilities, whereas this, we would have training before we roll it out to our personnel. Year 2 would be $30,500, and it goes up by a small percentage every year thereafter, which seems to be the consistent trend across the industry. Nobody's locking in at 5-year prices. There's small incremental increases every year for the use of software.
So some of the information we got back from the RFP that was put out with the county, this is to give you an idea of what it looks like. The total cost for one of the systems that did return a response to the RFP was almost $2.5 million. Now again, the RFP was put out with the city and the county, so this cost would actually be split, which the percentages of that split would have to be worked out, but this, we wanted to be able to give you an idea. So a rough cost for the city funds for a one-time expense would be $1.2 million, with the recurring cost being 155. As a little point of information, the current recurring cost for the system we have is 145. So there's a little bit of an increase for that yearly maintenance fee. Some of those funds are also, or would be 911 eligible. The CAD portion would actually be able to potentially be reimbursed through the 911 board. So that would also have a little bit more of a cost savings.
But we don't know what that's going to have to be negotiated between the city and the county as to how much the city pays. Currently, like the 800 megahertz, that it's not a 50-50 split. It's a little bit different.
They probably use a larger share of it, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Well, and there were things within the RFP that would be specific to them
For them.
as well. Obviously, we wouldn't use the jail management piece of it. We wouldn't use the civil portion of it. So there would be areas that we would have to actually work out of what we would pay. But we wanted to give you an idea of what this is going to look like potentially going forward. Additionally, from the time we sign the contract, it's at least 18 months before anything goes live. And those costs are spread out over time, with any contract. There's an upfront cost, and then as the contract is developed and the things are put in place, then those costs. So it would actually be able to potentially spread those funds out over two budget years instead of impact into one budget.
We don't anticipate this impacting next year's budget significantly.
Does that include maintenance and other support?
Yes. The $155,000 annual maintenance would be what the support and the maintenance fees. And again, we're paying $145,000 now with Central Square.
Appreciate the excellent work that the staff has done on this. Appreciate your patience, long presentations, but important information. As the chief said, there is a silver lining, and that is most likely we will not face this in FY22. On the other hand, we will know more on Thursday. They will have one more session with the joint team of the Sheriff's Department and the county and the city working on these. RMS for fire, that is something that we might consider in the FY22 budget, but in FY22, it is doubtful CAD and RMS for police will need to be addressed. But we felt it important for you to see what is going to be facing a year or so away. Any final questions that you have on this agenda item?
I'm just going to say that it's comforting to see the staff taking a long-range view of the city's needs and their operational needs and not satisfied with the status quo. It's also comforting to see the trends of management proficiency evident here, that you've seen fit not to handle these presentations directly yourself, and both chiefs have not handled these presentations directly themselves. They've relied on their deputies, which is encouraging to know that the entire management of both units are looking ahead and not relying on just one person. Good jobs.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things I am the most proud of is the fact that we now have bench strength in young people. And while I would like to consider I'm one of those young people, I am not. And I will tell you that the presentations that you've seen with Susan and Michael, presentations you've seen with Wally and Anthony, the presentations you've seen with these young people tonight, this is your future leadership. Actually, this is your current leadership, and they're all young. And T, you're young. Now, Mike, I'm going to let you decide, are you young?
At least I got a compliment out of it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bittner. Any other questions on this item? I know you have another very important item coming up.
Questions?
Good job.
Well, at this point, the staff is going to step out because the next item really does not involve us. I know Mr. Carter is going to stay. Carmen Miracle will be staying. Well done, staff. Very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you all. So we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 14 for tonight, and this is the appointment for Ward 3 vacancy. At the February 16th meeting, the council agreed to seek interest from our Ward 3 citizens in filling the Ward 3 council seat that was vacated by Michael Lazzara, who is now has been elected to the North Carolina Senate and has left his seat in the council. I've had the opportunity to review the 17 letters. There's been 17 people that actually sent in letters of interest. And my opinion, based on what I read, every one of those candidates are qualified and worthy of this appointment. But I want to thank each of them for taking the time, the energy, and having the desire to serve the public. I also want to thank the citizens of Ward 3 who have also shown interest, which is a demonstration of their interest in good government. So with that said, at this time, I'm going to ask John Carter, our city attorney, to proceed at this point. Tell us how to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to preface my remarks by saying whoever may be appointed by council would only serve until the next municipal election. We all expected that to be in November of this year. But at this point, with the lack of census information, the issue of redistricting and so forth, it appears that that election will not be occurring this year, but rather will be occurring probably in May of next year. At that point in time, whoever decides to run for Mr. Lazzara's seat would be again running for an unexpired term. So if they run in 2022, they'll have to turn around and run again in 2023 for the full 4-year term. So again, whoever would be appointed by council tonight would have that to look forward to, 2 elections down the road if they wanted to continue. I want to give to you my recommendation, which I have looked at through the Robert's Rules of Order, the School of Government, and I think it's the best course forward with this number of people who have, as the mayor indicated, shown an interest in the seat, 17 people from Ward 3. And that is to use this ballot, and this has been used before, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, in 2004. And each of you have this ballot in front of you. Now, the only persons who would be entitled to vote would be the 5 council members. The mayor only votes in the case of a tie here. To win on a ballot, then a person would have to get a majority of the votes, which would be 3 of the 5. The ballots, as you can see, Carmen has actually put the law at the bottom if you just elected to go this way. And this is important because what we're suggesting to you is that someone nominate all 17 people. And there'd be a second to that nomination. And using the ballot that you have in front of you, each of you, the 5 of you, vote for one person, whoever you select to vote for, you sign it. And we lay it on the dioceses there, and the clerk will pick those up, and then we'll look and see if there's a majority for one person or if there's a second ballot. But again, let me first say on this ballot, or any ballots, they're immediately after this evening become public records, and your vote as individual council member, that's why you sign it, will be recorded in the minutes, okay? I'm going to go ahead and talk about what my suggestion would be if there's not a majority on the first ballot. My suggestion would be that whoever gets at least one vote on the first ballot be carried over to a second ballot. That could be anywhere in my mind from 5 people to 3 people. And if there's a second vote, we have prepared another ballot, which you don't have in front of you right now, but just to let you know, that on that you would actually write down one of those 5 people if you go along with my suggestion, recommendation, and then you sign it there also. And we'll see if, again, we have a majority. History is a great teacher, and I think it's important to talk a little bit about history because the last time this happened in the council chambers was in 2004, December of 2004. Councilmember Martin Aragona ran and was elected to the county commissioners, and so he resigned from the council. At that time, the council sent out asking for written letters of interest, and they got 12. You know, I'm glad to sit here and to serve you and to serve our departments and our citizens, but it's on nights like tonight, when you have to make these kind of decisions, I am so glad I don't sit on that side of the dais. This is tough decisions. And it was tough in 2004. And I think it's important to look back and to see some of the names that they had of those 12. George Barrows, Ronnie Bell, June Buchanan, Michael Klein, Patrick Harris, Mike Hewitt, George Maynard, Craig Reed, Homer Spring, Bill Terrell, Alva Williams, Jim Yantor. And of those 12, Mr. Maynard was elected on the first ballot. And those council members that were here at that time who had that decision to make, I think it's important to note them. Mr. Blunt, Ms. Cleveland, Ms. Coleman, Mr. Mann, Mayor Slagle was the mayor, and the mayor pro tem at that time sits tonight again as the mayor pro tem, Mr. Bittner. He was the mayor pro tem at that time and also sits tonight. But Mayor and Council, that would be our recommendation, or my recommendation to you as to how to proceed as far as the balloting. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, Attorney?
Move to put all 17 names into nomination.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
So Mayor would ask that the 5 members would mark an X by one of the names and sign their name to it and turn it over and put it in front of them, and the clerk will collect those when all of those have been, you finish voting.
All right. The clerk will record these votes. The clarification, you want me to give all the totals, all the numbers?
It's up to you, Mayor. It's going to be public record, but yes, you can go ahead and,
Logan Sosa is elected with 3 votes. Frank Claiborne with 1, and Robert Sandy 1.
so Mr. Sosa has been elected. He received a majority of the votes.
Yes, 3 votes.
And our plan, Mayor, with y'all's permission, is to plan for the next meeting, the first meeting in April, I believe it's the 6th, to have Mr. Sosa and his family here as being the newly elected member of council, and to have the swearing in right before you begin your business session that evening.
On that April 6th meeting.
Yes, sir.
And we'll discuss this with him
If
at a later time.
if that's okay with the mayor and council, and it works in Mr. Sosa's schedule and his family's, we'd like to go ahead and do that so that he can begin. Of course, he's been here this evening and has begun hearing some, but there is a learning process that each of you know better than I sitting here. And we want to go ahead and begin that, and we'll get in touch with him immediately and work toward that.
So on April 6th will be the swearing-in date.
Yes, sir.
Prior to business being
As
taken
part of
care
your meeting, but that'll be the first agenda item. So that he
So
can,
you'll work with him in getting whatever needs to be set up as far as the swearing in, and also any training or what have you.
work on that.
He has to have. All right. Again, I want to thank everybody that did send a letter in. It's a shame that we didn't have 16 open or 17 open seats, because, like I said, everybody was qualified. Everybody was a worthy candidate. So, anyway.
I was going to say, Mayor, that I was just simply amazed the extent the applicants exhibited service in the community, governmental experience, former council people, members of boards and commissions, specialized degrees in education and training and so on. It's amazing the wealth of talent we had to choose from. It's a shame we couldn't choose more.
But there's an election. There'll be an election sometime next year, correct, Mr. Carter?
Sometime in the near
Should be.
future is all I will commit right now.
Unless something really goes bad, it should probably be sometime around the May timeframe.
Yes, sir, we believe that.
2022.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, thank you very much. So we'll go to our report section. And I'll begin with Dr. Washington. Mr. Ward.
Glad to be here, sir.
Thomas.
No report, thank you.
No report?
No report.
Dr. Woodruff.
We have one thing, given the hour, we will not have the 1 minute, the city 1 minute moment, but we do have the budget schedule we'd like to show the public, so if the media would bring that up, please. Well, we have one city moment there. Okay. It is that time of the year that the council looks forward to, and that's our weekly meetings to discuss money. So you can see that while we've had some workshops in March, in April, we get down to literally weekly business. Any of those dates that you're not available, we would like for you to let us know. We do consider having the public hearing on April the 20th. And then we hope to have the budget adoption sometime in the end of May. We remind everybody it must be adopted no later than June the 30th. With that, I will not have any other points other than to say that City Hall and city buildings will remain closed due to the COVID virus through the end of April. Later in the month of April, we'll determine whether we will be opening up for public activities. Thank you again for the leadership you provide this community. Well done.
Mr. Carter. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So move.